Hello and welcome to Chamber Conversations. I'm Rick Weldon, the President and CEO of the Frederick County Chamber of Commerce. Today's conversation features one of my favorite people in Frederick County, and that's Tony Checchia. Tony is the owner and broker of VCRE Commercial Real Estate. Tony has always been my go-to guy for any questions that deal with real estate, life in general, how to connect better with Rotarians, you name it. Tony's been sort of my guy. And Tony is someone that everybody knows, but what you may not know about Tony is that he earned a double major at Mount St. Mary's University in economics and Spanish. So all his financial projections are grounded in good education and science. In 2018, my buddy T was awarded the Fred Award for Broker of the Year by the Frederick County Office of Economic Development. And that's a big, big, big deal in our local commercial real estate community and frankly in the region. Tony has absolute understanding of the concept of being connected. This is a guy who's been an officer in FCAR, the Realtors Association for our county. He served on the Frederick County Foundation Board, the Tourism Board. He was a member of the Business and Industry Cabinet for Frederick County, served as a vice chair of the City Historic Preservation Commission, and most importantly, an almost 20-year dedicated history to the Rotary Club of Frederick, including a term as president of that group. Tony is well known for having brought back to life the Frederick Indoor Sports Center as a dedicated long-term soccer player in Frederick County, and also a guy who's passionate about doing good things with business. So it's a real pleasure to be with you, Tony, and we're doing this conversation a little uniquely. Tony's gonna do kind of a driving tour and talk about the real estate market in Frederick County, particularly focused on the commercial real estate market and the impacts of COVID-19 on that critical component of our industry sector. So welcome, T, and why don't you talk to us about some of the domino effects of COVID-19?
Rick, good morning. I couldn't breathe. Does this mask make my ears look bigger? A little bit, maybe?
I'm not gonna answer that. Yeah. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot ear.
Well, I'm gonna take the mask off. I've been amused by folks driving around in their cars with their masks on, and I've wondered, what are they afraid of? It's just them. But anyway, Rick, it's great to be here with you today. Thank you guys for doing this. And thank you for indulging me in allowing a little change to your normal format, although you will see, hopefully you can see, we do have some passengers with us here today. So I've got the lovely Shebre Moore, your first, I believe she was your first guest here in the passenger seat. Amanda and Jason Lee in the back. I got you guys coffee. Just pulled up in front of Beans and Bagel before we started. Matt's in the back there. Make sure that social distance him far enough in the back. And Rick, your twin brother's right up here up front with his mask on. Since you'll be doing the talking, we want to make sure you don't infect the rest of us here in the car.
That face needs a full face mask.
But anyway, look, thank you again for doing this. I hope that you also will appreciate that I stopped in at the AutoZone this morning. They were open. It turned out with a little bit of drizzle here, my windshield wipers were doing the street. So I've gone with the micro edge wiper blades, which are whisper soft. So we will hopefully have no interference from them. But I'm going to flip my camera around, and to your question and to your point about the state of commercial real estate in Frederick. Just a real quick audio check. We're good. Visual check. Good.
Excellent.
Okay. Outstanding. So I'm in downtown. As I mentioned, I just went into Beans and Bagel. I saw Rich with his Pittsburgh Steeler mask on and asked him how he was doing. And he said, we're coping. We're doing okay. It's good to see people are still patronizing Beans and Bagel. Generally speaking, there is way more activity than you might imagine. And honestly, when this all started, I did not know what to expect. I don't think any of us could have predicted, what was going to happen. But we at VCRE have remained active. Real estate as an industry was deemed or has been deemed an essential business. So we have been allowed to practice, and obviously that's come with modifications. So we've gone, you know, similar to what you're doing at the chamber. We've gone virtual, viral, whatever you want to call it. Employed a lot of technology, doing a lot of video tours, better qualifying and better vetting interests before actually scheduling appointments to show any properties. But generally speaking, the market did not go to sleep, and the market is very active. Banks have been overwhelmed with all of the demand for the relief funds. So they've been a bit distracted, to say the least, and looking at any new opportunities for lending. But that's not to say that they haven't been taking applications and been processing them. It's just been slower. Probably the biggest thing, Rick, that has happened, and you know, I know when you talk with Chabris, your first conversation, you went into a lot of the details of all of the different programs that have been made available. So I'm not going to talk about that, but that was the first wave for us as well. We manage about 30 properties, and right out of the gates, probably within the first 2 days, I started getting the phone calls and the emails from the tenants. And I don't think I'm going to be able to pay my rent. What do I do? So the first thing we did was forwarded a lot of the information that we got from our accountant, from the chamber, and from others to get those businesses lined up to seek the assistance. And then we started having the conversations with the landlords, because in many cases, most of the properties, the landlords have mortgages. Those mortgages need to be serviced. So there's that domino effect, as you mentioned. You know, if I can't have tenants paying rent to me, I can't make my mortgage payment. Not to mention the fact that there are a myriad of other expenses that go beyond the mortgage, utilities and upkeep, and you know, all the other expenses that that one incurs when they own a property. So we went through that wave, and we're prepping ourselves for the second wave. The beginning of April was the first wave, as most rent payments are due April 1, or you know, beginning of any month. So now we're anticipating a second wave here as we approach the end of the month. We're anxiously awaiting the conversation that and the discussion that our governor is going to have this afternoon, which will hopefully shed some light on a reopening plan, and we'll start to see some relief to some of the restrictions or modifications. What I'm hoping for is some logical modifications that allow some other businesses to start operating. I don't think anyone's expecting that we're all going to be able to just, you know, wake up May 1 and go back to work and life is normal. But we certainly do hope that we have some relaxation and, or as I said, I think some modifications to the restrictions that will allow businesses to get back to doing what they do. A lot of businesses, as is obvious to state, that they're struggling, and it just is amazing to me how connected the businesses are. You know, you never really think about it until something like this happens. And, you know, in my lifetime doing this for 3 decades now in Frederick, I've been through the market ups and downs. When I first started in real estate, interest rates were 18%. You know, today they're below 4%. Right. There were 120 agents at the brokerage that I joined, and within a year it dropped to 30. So it was a much different time. We came into this pandemic with a super, super strong economy, and I think one that's going to be very resilient, provided that we can get back on track here and get things opening up in May.
So I'm not sure that the governor's going to give us a date certain. I think what he's going to lay out are the criteria in order to establish those dates. But even that right now would be good.
Yeah, Rick, I know you follow me on Facebook, and we don't have enough time to get into Facebook posts in this conversation, but I have been advocating strongly for hope, and we have to have hope. We have to have certainty, or if it's not certainty, some type of a roadmap, some type of a predictable pathway that we can follow. And I think that's all we need right now. a little later in the conversation, I want to get into some examples of some transactions and how that roller coaster ride that we've been on, what it's been like. But let me just say this. I think that more than anything right now, what people need to embrace is that the world is not coming to an end. B, Frederick and the Frederick market, I think, is one of the most resilient and pliable markets that I've ever observed. And that's looking at it over a 30-year history. Like I said, when we've had recessions and when we hit the peak in 2006, 2007, and then we went into a 3-4 year slide, Frederick fared better than a lot of markets did. And I think that has a lot to do with the richness of our county. And also, we're just blessed with the location. We are the apex of that triangle from DC and Baltimore, and we benefit from that greatly. And I got to tell you, there are investors that are calling and saying, hey, what are the opportunities that are out there? You may or may not know this, but my favorite movie of all times is It's a Wonderful Life. And one of the most powerful scenes in that movie is when there's the run on the bank. And Jimmy Stewart's George Bailey, his character, he's in the bank and he's scratching his head and he's trying to figure out how to manage that crisis. And there were two people that kept their heads as depicted in that movie. George Bailey and Harry Potter, Mr. Potter, Grunchkin, who, by the way, I think you kind of look a little bit like with your new hairdo, but we'll put a pin in that. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that. But anyway, George and Mr. Potter kept their wits about them, and that's what we've been counseling our clients. Like, look, don't make a decision right now under duress in this state of what's going on. It'd be the absolute worst time. There are actually new provisions that were quickly created by the Maryland Association of Realtors, the National Association of Realtors, as well as some local attorneys that put COVID clauses together to allow for transactions to simply take a pause.
Right.
And just say, hey, let's put things on hold, or let's extend our contractual timelines till we can get some better sense of where we're going and how things are going to evolve. You can see FireX is down here. There's been a lot of behind the scenes servicing going on to properties, property management. With this pause, I know a lot of landlords that are playing catch up. At the Frederick Indoor Sports Center, we're in the process of removing both fields and replacing both playing surfaces, taking advantage of this downtime. We've gone around and created a master checklist of to-do things that you never seem to have time to do. So we've been productive in that sense. Overall,
I talked about when we first started this, I talked about the need to pivot, right? To use this time to reevaluate how you do what you do, who you serve, how you serve them, because it really is a unique opportunity for us to take a breath, look at what we do, and evaluate ways to do it differently.
Well, and if you embrace the technology, Rick, at the end of the day, there's so much that can get done, with the use of technology. That's incredible. And also, I'm marveled at how much more efficient we can be. There's nothing that beats that office interaction, but that office interaction sometimes is awfully distracting.
Yeah.
My biggest challenge right now is our puppy Banks and the kids and their homeschooling. But beyond that, it's been a very productive time. And real estate in general, as I said, it hasn't taken a hard pause. There are new opportunities that have been created, new businesses. Certainly, our assembly type businesses are suffering. God, I feel awful for, the restaurants, the theaters, golf courses, for God's sakes. I mean,
special event venues, photographers.
Special events. And when you think about, back to your word, domino effect, when you think about the interconnections between all of these businesses and how we all depend upon our vendors and our suppliers and how deep that goes, it's a little bit paralyzing when you start to really think about how interconnected we all are, which is why, I believe more than ever, we need to believe in each other. We need to trust each other. And we need to trust that not only will our economy come back, but it'll come back stronger if we don't panic. Yesterday, the Frederick County Association of Realtors had a virtual monthly meeting, and Wayne Six, a local real estate appraiser, spoke about the market. And he said this. He said that there is so much pent-up demand that he anticipates supply is super, super low. Now, Wayne was, I should preface this, Wayne was speaking about the residential market, and the number of listings are really low. The demand is still very high, and he fully anticipates that not only will there not be a reduction in values, but he actually thinks that there may be an increase in values because the demand is so high, the interest rates are so low, that activity is going to, once people are able to get back to work and feel like there is that pathway forward, that the market is going to boom. And, what is traditionally a spring market will be a summer market, will be the spring market, if you will.
Right.
So Rick, I just pulled up to a property. Yeah, I just pulled up to a property next to the hospital. I'm at 605 North Bent Street. So let me just tell you a little quick story. This property was under contract 45 days ago. The buyer had a 30-day study period. They were nearing the end of their 30-day study period, and for all intents and purposes, everything was fine, and they were ready to proceed. And then their world got turned upside down. They got hit very hard and had to lay off half their staff, and they panicked. The emotions got the better of them, and they decided that it was just time to cancel, terminate. So they terminated the contract. A week later, we had 3 new offers on this property. The buyers, the original buyers, I think it was the following day, I think it was the president, I don't remember if it was the president or someone, started talking about, we're going to put together our phased-in plan for reopening the economy. Do you remember that? Was that about two weeks ago?
About 2 weeks, yep.
And just then, a light bulb went off, and they called me, and they said, you know what? We think we might have panicked, and we think we might have been premature, and we're encouraged by the discussion, at least the discussion. We'd like to re-engage, and we'd like to resubmit a new offer. And so they did. And they were able to renegotiate the contract. The sellers made additional concessions, so the buyers ended up with a better deal, gained about $75,000 of value. And, this property is just under a $2 million property. So not an insignificant adjustment on the part of the seller, a gain for the buyer. It's back under contract again, and the parties are slowly moving forward with the transaction and anticipating closing in July. So a happy story in the end. We're still not at settlement. The building itself has 8 different businesses that operate. 2 of the businesses, well, I should say, 3. One's a barbershop, one's a church, and one's a training center. Those 3 businesses have suspended their operations. All are anticipating coming back online once they're allowed to. And this transaction is going to move forward. So, as I said earlier, the market didn't stop, and interest in properties didn't stop. And I'm getting a lot of calls from people saying, wow, market values must really be plummeting. And I asked Wayne yesterday, one of the questions I asked of Wayne is, does he anticipate that there'll be a COVID adjustment to values? And he without hesitation said, no, absolutely not. I don't anticipate any adjustment to values due to this COVID pandemic. It's almost like, if you think about it, you know, it's been a 2 to 3 month impact, a short time frame that has basically just put everything on hold. But somehow real estate and investment in property and you know, lenders are continuing to move forward. And obviously a big factor in that has been the CARE Act, all of the different programs that the SBA has provided, the city of Frederick stepping up with the micro grant, the Office of Economic Development put out, and other organizations, the Community Foundation and others have been phenomenal at stepping up and helping out businesses getting through, you know, the cash flow crisis.
So can you talk, we only have a couple minutes left, but can you talk a little bit about kind of where you think we go from here, where we kind of need to go from here?
Sure. Rick, I think, you know, I mentioned earlier that there were some new addendums and some new clauses that have been generated yesterday or the day before when you had your discussion with Matt. You still back there, Matt? Yeah, he's actually taking a nap in the back.
I've never heard Matt be this quiet this long.
I know, right? Well, he's sleeping in the back. I had to put him all the way in the cargo area just to keep the physical distancing going. But there's that provision in the leases, you know, the force majeure, or however you pronounce it, force majeure provision. We're starting to already see conversations about two things. You know, a tenant leasing from a landlord, you had that provision that allowed you to suspend your obligations, and there's going to be legal challenges and some clarity being lent to that language in the future. So that's one change. The other is the whole concept of what's a non-essential versus an essential business. You know, if you think about it, if I'm a landlord and I have a property that's full of essential businesses, something like this isn't going to impact me.
Right.
But if I have a business or a property that's full of non-essential businesses, then obviously any kind of disruption to my cash flow as a landlord is going to impact potentially the value of the business. Now, the appraisers that I've spoken to have said, similar to reaction to what Wayne said about on the residential side, they don't anticipate that that's going to really become a factor. Where I see things going, Rick, I see things in an extremely, you know, I'm a glass half full guy, and I think Frederick and Frederick's market is only going to go forward. I think the Frederick community is resilient. I think the Frederick businesses are resilient. I think we're going to see some new businesses open up. Unfortunately, I do think we're going to have some restaurants that perhaps were struggling before we went into this pandemic that just simply are not going to be able to make it. But the infrastructure that those restaurant spaces has already in place is so valuable that I don't see any reason why other entrepreneurs won't backfill those spaces. And I'm not wishing anybody go out of business. You know, we've been doing our part going to restaurants for takeaway and carry out, but you know, you take a business like the Tasting Room, it's not a carry out business. I mean, you're not gonna buy a $40 steak and expect to get it home and it be the way that it is on that hot plate when it comes out to your table. So, you know, unfortunately, some of those businesses were just simply not able to adapt their business models. So I pray for them and I hope that they make it. But there's also a lot, and I mean a lot, of equity that's been built up that is just poised to be reemployed or redeployed, I should say. I wish we had more time. We could get into the opportunity zones. The opportunity zones, Associate Justin is tracking the discussions on extensions to the timelines that were established for investment in opportunity zones. So that could be a positive. That could end up being a very positive outcome from this crisis.
So we're going to be looking to launch a team to help us figure out how to re-energize this economy. And I'm thankful that you've already stepped up to the plate to volunteer to help us with that. And that might be the subject of our next conversation that you and I filmed together, is what that group sets out as its objectives and how we work with our partners in government and economic development and the private sector to pull all these things together. So I want to thank you a lot for the time you took today. You remind us again as you drive through downtown Frederick what a great and treasured place we live and work in. You're one of the leaders in this community in terms of building economic opportunity and creating success for people. So thank you for that, and I look forward to working with you to get things re-engaged.
Rick, God bless you. Thank you. Thank you and your entire team for all that you're doing. My passengers in here, I appreciate you guys being so respectful and quiet, especially Jason. I got to be honest with you. I was going to put Jason all the way in the back, but then I would have never heard the end of it.
We couldn't go today
last thing,
because it's raining.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to say, when I thought about doing this, I thought driving around, it was going to be just really ominous. And I thought it would be, like a desert town with no life. And I just driving around today makes me feel better. It makes me feel better about Frederick, our community. And again, just thank you for allowing me to be a part of your chats and talks. I'm going to mask back up and get my ears back on, and wish you all the best.
You get back to being our George Bailey, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, Harry Potter.